Like so much of strategy, the question about channel strategy isn't so much what kind of channel do I need, but what kind of channel do my buyers need? What your buyers need actually changes over time. And I'll show you how to work out what kind of channel your buyers need and how much they need in today's blog.
Funnel Vision is brought to you by Math Marketing, creators of the Funnel Plan. Math Marketing is the source of the 1, 2, 3 of B2B.
So we've talked quite a lot recently around market maturity, and we've used Geoffrey Moore's chasm theory, and we've used that as a framework for explaining that as the market matures, as their attitude towards buying a certain product or service changes and evolves, what they need, or in fact more importantly, I should say earlier, they're all important. The first question for us to ask as marketers is, what kind of buyer is ready to buy this product or service right now? And that's what changes. All of the other questions, and I'll come to channel, change as a consequence of that. But let me go back to underscore that again. In the very, very early stage of a market, kind of out here, is the only buyers willing to buy at that point are those who are willing to take a risk in order for some early return. Then the next group of buyers are those who are looking to buy or ready to buy, but only if the solution really looks perfect for companies like them. And then everybody's willing to buy. And then everybody's willing to buy is kind of a little bit of course and a bit ho-hum, and then the market starts to decline, and only some new uses and some new users will save us from a rapid decline. Now if that's who's buying, what they need also changes over time. We've already covered that. What I want to cover today is who they need to buy from, because that too changes over time. So let's take a look at what the buyers need. The very earliest buyers, the early adopters, they want to innovate. They're looking to use your product or service to create some advantage. So they want to be as close to the point of innovation as they possibly can. And that normally means buying directly from the innovator. Now, if it's your innovation, well and good, they should be buying from you directly. If you're a reseller of somebody else's innovation, think carefully about whether this is the time in the market that you should be putting your efforts in. Often it's not. The early adopter wants to buy from the innovator themselves. And frankly, the innovator wants that too. The innovator actually wants to buy, wants to be selling directly because they can hear all the feedback. Now the next group of buyers here in Bowling Alley, the next group of buyers are slightly more pragmatic, and they want to see buyers just like them who've already used the product or service. And so they want trust and they want confidence, and that still comes from buying directly, typically not through the channel. Now if you can give them enough trust selling through a channel, you might consider it, but default setting, you're still selling directly. It's also a bit too early. The channel doesn't really want to get involved. Third-party resellers typically want to be involved when the market's growing at its greatest, and it's not yet. So don't expect a channel to do your spade work for you. You should do it. Now, as we move into Tornado, that's the phase when buyers know they need to buy a product or service like this. It's a question of whose do they buy. And now, they probably actually want to buy it from a multi-product channel. They would prefer to buy it from a company that can give them your product, maybe even a competitive product side by side, but certainly your product and all the other things necessary to make a complete solution. So whether it's tied dependent resellers or multi-product resellers, you can work that one through. But certainly what your buyers need is convenience, and often that means being able to look at alternative products. And so now's the time you should be selling through a channel. What do your buyers need in Main Street? Well, Main Street, kind of everybody's bought once or twice and they're buying again, typically in B2B. And in Main Street, it's now what we call the infrastructure buyer who's doing the buying. It's IT, it's not the end user department. Or it's finance, not the end user department. Sometimes it's even procurement, but again, it's not the GM of the end user department, as it maybe was earlier. What they want to buy, well, if they're a big buyer, they want to be buying from you, the vendor, directly. And so we've actually gone from being deliberately direct, probably direct, deliberately through a third-party channel, and now to Main Street, again, for the big buyers, direct. What about small buyers? Well, they'd like to buy directly as well, but really, what do they care about? They care about buying from the easiest channel, and as margins have started to decline, you need it to be a low friction channel. What does that really mean? We'll come to that, but we'll focus on the buyer for the moment. It means they want to buy the way they want to buy. In Main Street, they're going to dictate terms. The big buyer is going to insist on buying from you directly, and the small buyer wants it to be super convenient. Now, as we decline, we've got two types of buyer. We've got the laggards who are finally coming on board, and they really don't get to dictate state of play because the market's in decline and you have to be really careful about your channel strategy. But if you've ridden that wave, that hyper-growth period really well, and you are the gorilla in the market, you probably want to slow the decline down. And you're now selling to new users and new users of your product or service. What does that buyer need? It's like the early adopter in the very first wave of the market. They need to be buying from the innovator, whoever that is. And that might be the vendor. It might actually be a really clever channel who's built a new solution based on the product. Whoever is innovating for that new use or new user, that's who they want to buy from. The second part of our thinking here needs to be about capacity. How much sales channel do we need, direct or indirect? And I want to give you two concepts that we need to somehow reconcile. The first one is, how much capacity do we need? And so the demand side of this is, how many buyers going through each stage in the journey, how many buyers are going through each stage, and how many meetings will it require to get them through each stage? Multiply the number of buyers by the number of meetings, add the product of all of those rows together, and what that's going to give you is the number of meetings that you need for each period. So that's the demand side. Now let's look at the supply side, and that is, what kind of sales capacity do we have? And that's a function again of two products. Well, it's the product of two factors, excuse me. First one is, how many reps do we have? Now, if you're going through a third-party channel, don't say, look, I've got 10 resellers and I've got 3 reps each, therefore 30. Because if they're selling your product and 10 others, you might have 5 or 10% of their time. So be very careful about considering how much selling capacity you really have. If you added again, I'll stick with the third-party channel example. If you added the amount of time that you get from each of the reps across each of your resellers, that's your capacity. It might add up to 2 or 3 full-time equivalents across 30 reps. And that is the equivalent of having 2 or 3 full-timers, but spread across 30 who sell multiple things. Careful. So that's your number of reps. If it's direct, it's easy. How many salespeople do you have? But if you're a small business and as directors of the business you are selling, be careful not to count yourself as one, because you probably also do payroll, product development, admin, put the rubbish out. I know how that feels. So it's not all of you. You know, I might spend maybe 25% of my time selling. So I only count as 0.25 of a full-time equivalent. Full-time salesperson might be 1, and another director who maybe spends 50% of his time might be 0.5. So therefore, 0.5 of the other director, 1 full-time rep, and 0.25 of me would make 1.75 full-time equivalents. Now, for each FTE, how many meetings can we conduct in a given week? Now remember that you've got holidays to allow for, you've got sick leave to allow for, you've got public holidays to allow for, you've got training time, you've got admin time. So be realistic. My starting assumption is normally 5. The average FTE in complex B2B can handle 5 meetings per week. Now you might have a model that can handle more or that can handle fewer. Think about it, start with 5. How many FTEs times how many meetings per week, and that's now your inventory. Your utilisation therefore is a function of your inventory compared with your demand. If you're sitting at 50% utilisation, what that says is that either you can handle twice as much market or half as many reps. If your capacity or your utilisation is sitting at 200%, that means you either need twice as many reps or twice as much, or half as many buyers going through the funnel. But there are some variations on that. If let's stick with a 200% example, what if we can actually increase the number of meetings that our reps can have by adding inside sales and some sort of sales support function? Could that get our number of meetings up? Equally, number of meetings consumed, can we actually get that down by asking marketing to step up to the plate and take more of the responsibility to move buyers through the funnel, through those early stages in the funnel, and expect sales to do a little less? Now, I would argue that's the sign of a modern marketing function, one that successfully helps salespeople to get involved a little later in the sale and does the early work on their behalf. Lots of things to think about as you contemplate what sort of channel and how much you need.
Shortly, we'll show you how to do this in Funnel Plan. But before that, we're going to do 2 things: share with you our conclusions and invite you to receive other blogs like this. Let's get to the conclusion first.
So getting concrete about what we actually need. If you think that your market is at the early stage of its maturity, you've only got early adopters willing to buy at this point, you want to be selling directly. If you're the innovator, sell directly. Collaborate with your customers. In bowling alley, they're looking for trust. You probably want to keep going directly unless you've got a really industry knowledgeable partner who can step up. Once you're in tornado, you pretty much want as many arms and legs as you can get. So you are going to be selling through a reseller channel in large part at this time, and quite frankly, that's what your customers want anyway. In Main Street, for your largest customers, they're going to insist on you selling directly, so accommodate that. And your smallest customers, you need a mass channel. That might be web, that might be telesales. It could be stores. Think about mobile phones. These days, small businesses have to get their mobile phones from the local store that also sells to the consumer market. Why? Because we're unwilling to pay $200 a month for our mobile phones. At the prices we are willing to pay, the vendors have no choice but to sell through a store location, and therefore as buyers we have no choice but to buy through that location. It becomes a function of economics at this point. As the market declines, we're now into the heading towards end of life for the market. At this point, the ideal channel will be, if you've ridden the cycle well and you're trying to extend it, then you really want to be selling probably still directly to your largest customers, but for your new users and new users, definitely directly. So you're still going direct. Again, think about it, we've gone from direct to probably direct, or maybe industry specialists, to definitely through a third-party channel to direct and direct. Now, here's the one exception. As the market declines, we're still in this kind of downside of the market. As the market declines, if you haven't ridden that curve well, you need to be really, really careful. You're not the gorilla, you're one of the chimps. You need to probably bury your technology in somebody else's product and let them do the selling. So what's your channel? Well, frankly, you're an OEM. You are the original equipment manufacturer, and your product or service gets buried in somebody else's, and they are your channel. That's the one exception. Now we need to think about how much capacity we need, and I've already given you the parameters. You need to compare your inventory, how many full-time equivalents, how many meetings per week can each have, compared to your demand on that sales inventory, and that is how many buyers progress through each stage in the buyer's journey, and how many meetings does each of those progressions take. Compare one against the other. Now that can be complex and hard, but I'm going to show you shortly how to do that in Funnel Plan in seconds.
If you enjoyed this blog, then likely you will enjoy others. If you haven't already, you can subscribe to receive this blog by visiting mathmarketing.com/blog or by visiting our YouTube channel. If you have a colleague who may be interested, we would be so grateful if you invited them to subscribe. Why don't you do that now? And when you come back, we'll show you how we do that in Funnel Plan.
Let me start by explaining some context. You already know that the Funnel Plan captures your complete go-to-market. It's your objectives, your strategy, the tactics you're going to use end to end, and the velocity that you need to achieve to meet your numbers, and therefore that the tactics need to deliver. But today we're talking about strategy, and in particular channel strategy. But we can't start with channel strategy. We actually have to start with who the buyer is. When we understand the ideal client profile and the segments that we're going to find those buyers from, then we can choose our strategy. And in particular, we need to think about how mature are each of those markets. Let's flip into the Funnel Plan software and I'll show you how we validate the strategy, including the channel, once we're really clear on who the target market is. So let's choose our blogging video. We want in particular to take a look at strategy, but as I mentioned, I'm going to start with the target market and being really clear who they are. Now in the target market, we've identified the ideal client profile, ideal customer profile, but we've also identified the target segments where we're going to find them, the type of business and the role that we're targeting. Now here's the killer. We believe that those types of buyers are 20% of them in early market and 80% of them in bowling alley. Either way, we therefore need a direct strategy. So our sales channel is going to need to be direct at this time. Don't expect your third-party channel to do your spade work for you. Until you've created a market, it's not the time to bring a channel on. So now we can take a look at what the channel needs to be. And the who can best uncover the buyer's question really is like an ICP that I referred to before, the ideal client profile, but in this case it's an ideal channel profile. Now I've already said the channel is going to be direct, but clearly we want marketing to take a role in profiling and warming the prospects before sales gets involved. Then we've got direct sales. Now we know we need direct because it's an innovative buyer. And they're specifically not just any old direct sales force. These are not infrastructure buyers good at selling to finance, admin, procurement, and IT. These are salespeople good at selling to innovative buyers. Very important. And they're trained to identify and extract defined needs. In other words, they're visionary salespeople. So for sure they're direct, but they're a visionary sales force. Really important we get the right character, not just the right style or the right shape of channel. We want referrals from an innovation council. Now the suggestion there is that we're going to start an innovation council, get the early adopters together and call them an innovation council. And an early adopter or two in the chamber. Presumably the assumption there is some chamber of commerce that you're a member of. So we've got some referrals going on from early adopter types and a direct sales force, but particularly not only are they direct, but they are supported by marketing and they're salespeople competent to sell to innovative buyers. So they're visionary salespeople. Now, how many do we have and how many do we need? Well, we've got 7 salespeople in the beginning of year 1. So year 1's broken into quarters and Q1's broken into months. And those 7 eventually become 12 at the end of year 3. And we think that between them, they can do about 4 good meetings a week. Now, I know we want them to do more, but remember that a salesperson has to earn a meeting, plan for it, conduct it, and follow it up. And we think we can actually go at 4. But you can see with that sales force, we're going to be out really from the get-go. You can't have 121% utilisation, except for maybe a month, but not for 3 months and getting worse and ending up at around 200% at the end of the year. You just can't do that. And so we've got some big decisions to make. Really, there are 3 big levers we can pull here to fix this utilisation. Of course, we can hire more salespeople, But what if our economic model simply doesn't allow us more salespeople? What are the other levers? Well, we can ask them to be busier. Despite what I said before, maybe we need to get them up to 4 or even 6 meetings per week. Now, if 4 was actually the correct answer, you can't just ask them to work harder. It's not that simple. We actually need to support these salespeople with maybe some inside sales. So we're going to have an inside salesperson who will support these 7 or 8 salespeople, and their job will be to maybe earn their meetings. We've got a client who has a 1-to-1 ratio between inside sales and field sales, and the job of the inside salesperson in that company is to allow their salespeople to have 3 or even 4 meetings every single day. It's a valid model. Don't just change the number down here. If you're going to change the number of meetings, make sure you make a deliberate decision to hire some inside sales. Now, we could do that. The final lever that we get to pull, mindful that our problem is pretty much across the board, that is, over time, it's consistently a problem. Let's go back to our funnel velocity and look at how many meetings have been allocated for each stage in the journey. Now, we've allowed for 3.5 meetings, and perhaps that's our well-worn average. And those 3.5 meetings are consumed 2 meetings to get from need to offer and offer to preference. Need to offer took 1 meeting, offer to preference took 1 meeting. We've only allowed a half a meeting from gap to need and half a meeting from interest to gap. That's not excessive. In a lot of companies, we expect our salespeople to do the gap identification and the need identification. In this business, we've already asked marketing to step up to that plate. So I really don't have a lot of room to make adjustment there, and I'm still sitting at overutilization. The third lever just isn't going to work. I have no choice on this occasion other than to go back, take a look at my inventory, that is, go back to the strategy channel, take a look at my inventory and either increase my salespeople or ask them to do more. And the decision that I'll make is I'm going to ask them to get up to 7 or 8 meetings per week. That's getting close to 2 a day. But to support them, I'm going to make a significant investment in inside sales to achieve that efficiency. And that's the only way I can get that utilization down.
Next week on Funnel Vision.
I'll show you in next week's show how to set your competitive strategy and how that changes as the market matures. But for now, may your funnel be full and always flowing.